understanding of what, ooh, an understanding of what the professional side of evaluation is. Now, understand, I've had questions already from several people. How is it possible that you can have done 4,500 evaluations? Well, that's at a low ball. I've trained about 1,500 military chaplains and about another 1,200, 1,300 executives, directors, and people in the medical, legal, financial, tech, and of course the military. My training is basically on engagement. And what I do is I give them the understanding, then they go ahead and they present for the audience, us. I then evaluate it. On an average training, a speaker or the class, which the class could be anywhere between 40 to 60 people, they speak anywhere between 3 to 5 times throughout the week. It's a 4-day training. 1,500 chaplains times 3 times that they'll speak is 4,500. That's the low side. The number is probably more or less at about 6,000 or 7,000. So I've had the understanding of giving professional evaluations to executives, to professionals, and I want to impart some of that information to you. Not just for you to actually use those particular tool sets and skills, but for you to understand how is it that a professional evaluation is formed. So allow me to share my screen. I'm going to be sharing some information I'm hoping that will be helpful for you. This, of course, is the understanding that when we give an evaluation, the idea is to express ourselves to the best ability that we have, to expose our understanding of what we just experienced, to excite the speaker in what we're actually sharing, and then to evaluate. So what is an evaluation? And I'd love to see from anyone here, what is an evaluation for you? And if you want to open mic it, you want to go ahead and go for it, that'd be awesome. Does anybody have an idea what an evaluation is?
Suggestions for improvement.
Adjustments for improvement. Okay, that's a good one. What else?
Feedback that will help us figure out whether the audience was reached.
Okay. Anyone else?
How it makes us feel.
Oh, I like that one. That's a good one. Who said that?
That's Scoshi.
Scoshi. Okay. Thank you. How it makes you feel. Good. Who else?
Baxter says, for me, it's giving feedback to give the speakers options.
I like that. Anyone else? Well, I'm going to share with you what the professional side of an evaluation. I'm converting it to what Toastmasters does, which is give evaluations to speakers. So this is the actual definition of an evaluation. And you can actually look it up, Patent 1987, modalities in evaluation, and this is evaluating anything. Now, we're going to actually concentrate on evaluating speakers. But what I want you to concentrate on this particular slide is the idea of activities, characteristics, and outcomes. That is what we're actually evaluating. Activities being how the speaker is speaking, what words are they using. Characteristics is how they are moving, how they are actually engaging with the audience, and outcomes being the message. We sometimes look past this primarily because we're so eager to give feedback. And the idea is to become analytical. There are phases to planning on how you actually create an evaluation. Now, Toastmasters gives you project-based evaluation. If a project is based on a particular topic, on a particular skill set that needs to be improved, you are to devise a talk that you will be evaluated on, and that is then presented to the speaker. My perspective of that, in that process, as you are writing, there are phases in the evaluation process. I'm going to share with you this science that I'm hoping that you'll understand. Well, of course you'll understand it. You're all smart people. When it comes to senses, the human senses, we have 5. In an evaluation process, you're using three. In my opinion, an evaluator and the evaluation role is probably one of the most difficult roles in a Toastmasters meeting. But because we're given a particular parameters, if you would, on how the presenter is to present, we're going to focus on giving that person an evaluation on what they're actually sharing. However, there is a process that has to occur in a professional setting. And I'll share those phases with you. First of all, there's planning. When a speaker is planning, when a speaker is speaking, the evaluator is planning on how they're going to go about giving this evaluation. Now, as I said earlier, there are three senses that are engaged, or at least need to be engaged. The auditory, visual, and kinesthetic. The auditory, of course, is what you're listening to from the speaker. The visual is what you're seeing, and in this environment it's a little different because we're only going from our belly button up, if you would. And then, of course, there's the kinesthetic where you're writing down information. Planning out on how you're going to go about using these senses in order to understand how this speaker is performing is something that people have difficulty with. Because there's something that occurs when one of your senses is contradictory to another one. Senses will not fight for the understanding that you should have. If you see something that doesn't make sense, but you hear something that does, there's going to be an argument. What happens is one of your senses is going to actually stop working. Not that it will just drop out of your mind, but you're not going to use that. Which is why most of the time and most of the evaluations that I've seen have been based on what people hear. Now, you've probably heard this before, that a good evaluation is to share what you heard, what you saw, and what you felt. That's correct. But oftentimes people will not be able to get all three. It is probably one of the most intensive parts of Toastmasters. Speaking is one particular aspect of your senses. It's your ability to share verbally your ideas and concepts. But as an evaluator, we're trying to pick up what we're seeing, correlate that with what we're hearing, and being able to put it down on paper so we then can review it. Planning that out is understanding what that speaker wants to accomplish and being able to go ahead and be able to tap into those senses. It just allows you to become more astute. Now, I'm going to be sharing you some concepts on how that works, but I wanted to give you that understanding. The first phase is planning. Implementation is being able to understand that you're going to implement a logical understanding of what that speaker is going to be delivering. You're going to lay out what you're seeing, what you're hearing, what you're feeling. Most people aren't able to do that. How often have you seen an evaluation where the evaluator will come up and they're basically repeating exactly what everybody just heard? Have you seen that before? Yes. Oh, that drives me crazy. We just heard the speech. You don't need to. Oh, yeah. And I like the way that you shared the story about your mom and how she actually looked up in the sky. And we just heard that. What is it that you want to share with the speaker that's going to allow him or her to improve or at least become aware of something they just delivered? This is the implementation part. This is where you start to plan, to put together what you're planning out. And there are ways of doing that. I'm going to be sharing a little bit more about that in a bit. Completion. Before you actually present your evaluation, you've got to complete it. Most of you know that the evaluation process is nothing more than a speech with the beginning, a middle, and an end. The idea is you need to complete it before you start your evaluation. And of course, being able to report it and how you start, how you begin. The difference here is that's the overview as far as phases are concerned in completing an evaluation. But the question might be, I got a question for you. Are you going to evaluate the same way with a motivational speech as you do with an obituary? Or are you going to evaluate the same way of a humor speech or one that is more designed for informational? Are you going to use the same phases in order for that to happen? Most people will say no. And I would say yes. Here's why. How many kinds of speeches do you think there are out there? Who would love to just tap in on that?
I'll say 70.
70 types of speeches? Wow, I like that. That's being generous. Anyone else?
15.
15. Thank you, David. I appreciate that. Anyone else?
I was going to say 10. Scotia.
10. Okay, Scotia. Thank you. Yeah, I'm trying to monitor the chat if I can. And by the way, if you have any questions throughout my presentation here, by all means, put it in the chat. I'll be able to field it as soon as I can. And I'll be asking if you have any questions. Well, let me ask this right now. As far as the phases of an evaluation, are there any questions about that? Good. Everybody got it. Man, I'm good. All right. So this is how many speeches, types of speeches there are. And when you start thinking about this, you're thinking, wait a second, there's more than these. Yes, of course there are. But for the essence in the Toastmasters world, this is what mostly is used. The planning and the phasing of your planning for an evaluation can be used in any one of these speeches. The outcome is what will be different. The messaging, if you would, that you're trying to bring up. Most of us are trained with the sandwich method of evaluation or the 3-2-1. And I love the 3-2-1, the 3 things they did well and the 21 things they really screwed up on. But, and then you try to get them to understand the 21 things. No, I'm kidding. The idea is we try to bring up this ways for them to improve. The reality is we want to bring them an awareness they may not be aware of. Anyone can stand there and say, well, you didn't do that right, and you didn't do that right, and you didn't do that right. Or as we're trained in Toastmasters, I think, I believe that you could have done this better, right? When it comes to any one of these speeches, you can give that evaluation to any one of these. But for the purpose of our presentation here today, or my presentation here today, I want to share with you the idea of these 6 types of speeches. Is there one that you think might be more important or more prominent in the Toastmasters world?
Inspirational seems to come to mind.
Inspirational, okay.
Motivational.
Motivational. Does anybody know the difference between motivational and inspirational?
One inspires you and the other one moves you.
Ooh, that's pretty good, David. Wow. David and I are friends, so I can make fun of him. I hope nobody feels like I'm picking on a particular audience member, but motivational is someone who actually takes the ideas of the person you're trying to motivate and brings it to another level. You're motivating them to take that idea, their concept, whatever they're working on, and motivate them to another level. Inspirational is to give people ideas to work on, to inspire them to something else. And that's the difference between the two. It's just a piece of trivia. I figured I'd just drop that on you. So with these, what is it that we're attempting to do when it comes to a particular type of speech? Is it beneficial for the evaluator? Because we all know that evaluators should be able to contact the speaker before they present and say, hey, can you tell me a little bit about what you're speaking about and what do you want me to look for? Isn't that interesting? Do we do that? Good. At least that's what I do. Would it benefit you if you asked the speaker, hey, is this a motivational speech or is this an instructional speech? Is this an entertaining speech? Because now that planning part could be something that you could start implementing because you're going to be looking for something in particular if you know what type of a speech it is. So that might be something to ask the speaker ahead of time, or for it to be a part of the introduction or part of the project, if you would, that they're going to take on. It allows you to be more astute and understand not that they're going to be meeting their goals, but you're going to look at it from a different perspective. You're still going to be doing the planning, the implementation, the completion, and the reporting of that particular evaluation, but you're going to look at it from a different perspective. So I'm going to share with you the idea that the reason that we bring up I bring up these types of speeches because most of them have stories. We don't really look into the informational type of a talk because that's very content heavy. But I put it in the list primarily because people do include stories when it comes to giving information. And stories is what actually moves people to another level. We all know that. That's why we inject or we work on our stories. So when we actually present, people can attach themselves to that. And I'm going to show you how to do that. The idea that a story works is because, as Dale Carnegie said, when dealing with humans, I got to read this more. Remember that you're not dealing with creatures of logic, you're dealing with creatures of emotions. And after all, even if you're giving a briefing in the military, there is still an emotional perspective to it. Even if it's, I believe, or I understand. And usually that's an opinion which has an attachment to an emotion. So are we evaluating that perspective accurately? Let me show you this. This is my evaluation sheet that I use. Now it's in duplicate, and I just took all I did was put it up there because I don't need a full sheet of paper. I just need this. This is what I use and what I look for when I evaluate a professional. I also use a portion of this when I evaluate a Toastmaster. I don't use it all, but this is what I work on. And you're probably wondering, what is all this, correct? Good. We all talk about eye contact and gestures. How many of you have been around back when the CC was around? Oh, the people with gray hair. Awesome. Thank you. I appreciate that. The idea that CC was the basics of speaking, and everything from the icebreaker to getting to the point, to vocal variety, to stage use and hand gestures, and so on, so on, so on. But that's the beginning. That's the basics. There's more to giving an evaluation or more to speaking that we can evaluate on. And this is what I use. And I use that the emojis, the happy emoji, the neutral emoji, and then the sad emoji to understand, because as the person speaking, I'm actually circling them, and I can circle whether they need to hear something from me that will be an improvement. The happy circle is, hey, if they're doing a good job, I don't need to basically mention it, because after all, let's be realistic. We want evaluations that allow us to grow, not just to feel good, even though we don't want to sit out there and say that you did a horrible job, or as my friend Gregor Kanice once said, I gave a talk about vacuum cleaners, and he said, Omar, you really sucked. The idea is that you don't really want to actually give that type of evaluation. And after all, what is an evaluation other than the scientific explanation of it? It's an opinion about the facts that you just saw. And sometimes, as in project-based evaluation, we put it up against a yardstick, and we have this measuring stick. If I was to start evaluating you and telling you of the things that you may not be aware of, you might wonder, where am I getting that information? Where am I basically using my yardstick, my measuring stick, my measuring cup to give you that information? Toastmasters gives us a project, so we're put into a parameter, if you would, that allows us to work within that box to offer evaluation. In the professional world, that doesn't exist. So an evaluation from me could be as much as 15, 20 minutes. It's not just the 3.5 minutes, but of course, based on time constraints, Toastmasters allows it for 3.5 minutes. Can I do it in 3.5 minutes? Maybe, but I'm covering quite a bit. So what is all this? Does everybody know what stripper's walk is? Yes. Okay. It's also referred to as a pitcher's walk, but I throw decorum to the wind. The stripper's walk is the understanding that in some of these places that men frequent, they can determine whether a young lady is able to dance and can dance properly before she actually gets on the stage. So the idea that when we were meeting live, we can tell the speaker where he's sitting or she is sitting as they come up to the stage. In this environment, we don't get to see that, but we do get to see what your first impression is. Are they nervous? Are they prepared? Are they fiddling? We can tell if they are prepared consciously or nervous about how they're going to present before they say a word. So it's something I look for. Is the person ready? Is the person really looking forward to actually presenting their idea and concept? Or are they nervous? Or are they concerned? Or are they very confident almost, to the point that they're almost comfortable? The idea of an emotional cap. I looked for this, and this is something I'll share with you. How often have you seen somebody take the stage and they've got this big smile on their face? Hi, I'm going to tell you about how my mom got run over by a reindeer. And the reality is, it doesn't make sense for me to smile, but sometimes we feel that if we take the stage, or if a speaker takes the stage, that if they have a smile on their face, that they're going to make us happy. The reality is, they just capped their emotional ability. They're unable to actually express happier. They can't come out with a smile and then say something that's funnier and get happier. It just doesn't work. They can only go one way, and that's down. So what is your neutral face? What is the speaker's neutral face? Can they make a range? Can they get happier or more serious? Do they have that ability? And if they do, mention it in an evaluation. That was great. You didn't cap your emotion, or you capped your emotion, and I couldn't really even feel that there was a sense of authenticity because everything seemed almost fake. That's something to take into consideration. Come on, truth. I'm going to get a little deeper into truth in a little bit, but the understanding of truth is facial truth. Most of you know it as somebody saying something that doesn't correlate with what you're seeing on their face. Like I said, I will get deeper into that. Hands, we're all basically looking at hands. We actually make comments about hands, how hand gestures are used. Do we know why we look at hands?
Because it can be distracting.
It could be distracting. Good. It's a signal of nervousness also from the speaker's perspective.
Or
Point of emphasis.
I think I was going to say the same thing I heard from Baxter. Add emphasis.
Exactly. That's a good point. Allow me to share with you a little history about hands, if you would. If I was to ask you, what is the first thing you notice about a person when you first walk up to them? Remember when that used to happen? When you used to walk up to a person? What is the first thing you notice? Most people will say eyes. That's the first thing. The reality is it's their hands. And that's almost in our DNA now, because back in Neanderthal times, that's the reason they opened their hands to say hi or shake their hands back when shaking hands started. The idea was to identify, make sure you're a friend, you don't have a weapon in your hand. So even using our peripherals, how a person is using hands is something critical. The idea becomes, are they using it in a nervous manner? How many of you have seen the praying speaker or the fig leaf speaker, right? Or the one with the hands in their pocket, which I'm going to share a little more later. Now, obviously, this doesn't happen in this environment. Hopefully, you'll get an opportunity to evaluate someone in a live presentation that you can actually give them more understanding as far as what their hands are actually doing. Eyebrows, the windows to the soul. It's not the eyes, it's the eyebrows. The eyebrows basically tell so much about how a speaker is presenting. Are they nervous? Are they bringing their eyebrows out? Can they possibly share a sad moment with their eyebrows up? It's almost difficult. Or being frowning and being able to share a happy moment. There is a correlation that occurs. And this is that part of the three senses that you're looking at from a speaker. If there's a disconnect, then more than likely something's going to give. You're going to lean more on what you're listening to than what you're watching, and not be able to actually give them that ability to understand, hey, your eyebrows went crazy. I had one particular speaker in one of my classes. I swear his eyebrows were on cocaine. They were just, and I had a hard time trying to actually share with him, and it wasn't him, share with him the idea. It's like, do you realize that your eyebrows? No, I had no idea. And I video record I almost said videotape. That would have aged me, but I video record just about everything that I train, and I can go back to the tape. Wow. I can go back to the recording and say, look, see your eyebrows? They're like really, really, coffee driven here. That awareness, bringing an awareness to a speaker, is probably the highest level of an evaluation you can give. One that they may not even be aware of. Again, I'm not going to hit dancing eyebrows. Oh, I like that, Linda. Appreciate that. I'm monitoring as I can. Eye connection, I'm not going to talk about eye contact, but in this environment, I will. All too often, we're looking down here into either our notes or something to the effect of what we're trying to look at, faces or something to that effect. This is where people are. We should be talking to the camera. In a live situation, where do you speak? You speak to people. Speak to them. We've been at this for 2 years. We should be good at it, and we should at least allow the speaker to understand that when we're giving an evaluation. Connectors, we know all of them, ahs, and so. That's a Toastmasters thing. In the professional world, it doesn't work, but I do mention it. Not for them to actually understand they did something wrong, like an counter would do, but that they should become aware of it. Stage use, although we're not in a live audience, there is a stage, and that stage is from here to here and from here to here. But if I back up, I have a bigger stage. I can actually open my arms. The idea is, are you sharing with the speaker the idea of their stage? Or are they actually just like a news reporter reading the news? Neither one is good or bad. It's just letting the speaker become aware. That's all. That's all I'm attempting to make sure that you're aware of. Notes. Are they using notes or a book or something to that effect? There's nothing wrong with it. However, for the last 2 years, many people have become reliant on writing their speech out and then talking about it, just almost reading their speeches. When we go back to live, there's going to be an interesting transition. Is the speaker using notes? Make mention of that. What is their pace? Some speakers will actually present, and if they have 5 to 7 minutes, they've gotten to point number 2 out of a 7-point speech, and they're 6 minutes into their talk. All of a sudden, their pace picks up, and they're talking a little quicker because they want to get through the whole program. Make mention of that. Allow them to understand that is their pace something that they can actually become aware of. Pausing, we all know that. After a humorous comment, allow the audience to relish in it. Make sure the speaker understands, hey, maybe a little pausing. In fact, this morning there was an evaluator, I think Linda was the evaluator, who evaluated someone and told them about pausing after a humorous comment. The idea, though, is in a competition speech, you may need to shorten that. So something's got to give. Just understanding that you can give that understanding to the speaker, they would very much appreciate it. Humor. Did they have any, and how was it? How could you improve it? These are the things I look for when I actually do a professional evaluation. Narrative. This is something that I bring up also primarily because oftentimes people are sharing a story and they're given this full narrative as if the story was the important part as opposed to the message. The narrative is not what we are basically there to hear. We're there to hear the message. Are they putting in too much narrative when they're actually putting out their speech? Are they giving too much color, if you would, to something that really isn't going to add to the message? Bring that up when you're giving an evaluation. Are they resolving their crisis? If any of you have had the opportunity to take a look at Kurt Vonnegut's methodology on storytelling or Pixar's, are they resolving before they get an opportunity to actually send their message? All too often, many people will actually bring a crisis up in their talks, maybe whether it's a story or not. And they'll get to the point where they're saying, yes, and now everything is really good, so we're awesome. That's a resolve. Well, what else is there after that? The message loses its strength. How creative are they? How believable are they? There shouldn't be any fear to tell a speaker, I didn't quite believe you. And it doesn't go to authenticity, but it does go to believability, as it does go to relatability. Can they relate with you? If I tell you the story of the time I got shot or I got stabbed, most of you can't relate to that. It doesn't really matter because it's not something it's not universal. These are the things I look for, and these are things that you may want to consider looking for. What's the word usage? You're Toastmasters, you know what I'm looking for. Are they doing everything in past tense? In other words, back when I was 16 years old, well, if you share a story that's in the past, more than likely it's not going to be as important as one that's done in the present. So instead of saying, when I was 16 years old, you can say, there I am in the midst of a jungle and I'm actually looking at alligators. You can then later on say, but you're posing the story, or the speaker should be posing the story as if it's happening right now, because it allows them to connect with the audience now, not in the past. Telegraphing. How often have you heard a speaker say, I'm going to tell you a story about, or let me tell you about this one particular event that happened to me. That's called telegraphing, and oftentimes it kills the mood. I don't want to share it that way. It does not allow the audience, because they are thinking so fast. And of course, I'm not going to get into the whole 400 word gap, but the idea they are thinking so fast, they're going to be moving ahead when you start mentioning that. So just tell the story. You don't have to actually give it that. You don't need to telegraph where you're going with that story. Pockets, just with hands, a person with their pockets, with their hands in their pockets, does bring up the idea of being nervous or suspicion, one or the other. Mention that when you go back to live. Story ratio. If you're delivering content with the story, what is the ratio of the story? And that's all personal. You may want to hear more story than you do actual content, or you may want to hear more content. Whatever that is for you, because it is an opinion. You're implementing an opinion about the facts that you heard. What is that ratio? Is there a ratio? Do you want to see more story? Do you want to see more content? Possessiveness. This is something that I bring up. Not how many of you. Do you remember a time when you started giving a talk and you talked about your brother, your sister, your uncle, your mother? That's all about what you own, not about who they are. And if you're bringing up a character, that character has a name. Use it. Let the speaker become a person that uses a name. If you hear them talking about their wife or their husband, and their wife and their husband, and you don't know their name, they haven't connected you with that person. They've connected you with the possession of that person. I'll bring that up in an evaluation. And tap and transport. Craig Valentine's really good at basically presenting this. The idea of tapping. Have they tapped you into their story? Have they transported into your story? That's a difficult perspective to actually see, but do you feel like part of it? It's like when people say, how many of you have done this? How many of you have had an accident in a car? Well, how about the ones that haven't? What if the speaker asked, do you recall the last time you had an accident? Or do you recall seeing an accident or knowing about an accident? Now you're involving everybody. They're tapping into people and they're transporting into the story. This is just, I'm sorry I went long on this. I just want to make sure you're aware that this is some of the stuff that I look for when it comes to actually delivering an evaluation. And I'll give you some handouts on this. I'm going to go back to Fruth, primarily because what is Fruth? And Fruth is facial truth. So I'm going to work with you here a little bit. Here's an emotional wheel. The emotional wheel this is what most people will actually look at when it comes to sharing an evaluation of a speaker. Were they sad? Were they bad? Did it correlate with what they were saying? These are the top 7 that we actually look for because it's instinctual for us to look at. But what if you actually can expand that just a little more and be able to tell the speaker, hey, you look threatened, or you actually look more repelled than anything else. When you use that type of word understanding, there is a definition that occurs. Although it's distilled down to the basic 7 emotions, you can actually give that speaker an understanding that there's more to it and there's nuances. In fact, if you really want to look at it, there's 132 emotions that actually can be 133 emotions that can be portrayed with our 43 muscles in our face. Can you share with the speaker how what emotion did you actually see? But this is something you have to become aware of. This isn't something that just occurs. So let's just do something here real quick. This is JJ. I have permission to use JJ. In fact, I use him in my trainings quite a bit. JJ is at this point, I think he's almost 2 years old, 1.5 years. And I'd like you all to just watch JJ. This is a 16-second video. I want you to take a look at it and tell me how many emotions you actually had an opportunity to see. Ready? Now, these are natural emotions. How many would you say did you see? Anybody?
About 5 or 6 at least.
I agree.
5 or 6, okay? Anybody else?
There were other nuances in there that might be kind of in between those 5 or 6, but
Okay. I'll share with you. I've had the opportunity to share this video with quite a few of my colleagues that are in the professional engagement world, and they all basically came up with, or we came up with, 12. There are 12 different emotions. Now, what if you can share that with the speaker, and you can tell the speaker they weren't just confused, but they were perplexed, and you were actually more definitive in how you actually bring up what you're watching. Now, again, you're listening to something, you're watching something, and you're writing it down. I said that evaluating is not easy, especially when you're trying to look for so much to assist the speaker to get to another level. But this is just an exercise that I share primarily for people to become more aware. How many emotions can a speaker actually bring up when they are speaking? It's not just the words. It's more about how they're portraying themselves, what they're projecting as opposed to what they're presenting. I'm going to bring up 3 more concepts, and then I'm going to get into it. And I want to make sure I want to be respectful of time too. Angel's Cocktail is something that some of you might be aware of in a different way. The idea of the Angel's Cocktail is to understand that there are words that we can use that actually drive particular chemical reactions in our brains. When a speaker does that to you, that's the part that is the feel. Did they make you feel good? Was there bonding? Most of the Angel's Cocktail actually works when we understand what is the Devil's Cocktail. The Devil's Cocktail is adrenaline and cortisol. You realize that every single good movie or any type of a good speech has a crisis. It has a villain. It has a particular negative or evil type of an element that then the hero or yourself or the speaker shares on how to actually get through that problem. They're driving devil's cocktail. That's the idea. If you can actually pick that up from a speaker, wow, I love the way you actually drove that crisis. You made me feel something. And if it's negative. So when they bring up the angel's cocktail, people embrace it ever so slightly. The idea is just to understand how that speaker is presenting information and how is it making you feel. That's the concept that you can actually bring up when it comes to evaluating. This is something I'll bring up. These are the 7 triggers that allows people to engage with you. FUDWACA. No, I'm not cursing. I just want you to understand the acronym. FUDWACA. Does anybody know what FUDWACA is other than my close friends? Okay. If a speaker is sharing any one of these words or the emotion behind them, more than likely they're implementing the devil's cocktail in order to get a reaction, or they're tapping into your past in order to transport you into their lives. Primarily, it's understanding frustration, how upset, disappointed, worried, angry, concerned, or anxious. Those are the 7 triggers that allows people to actually engage with a speaker. Many speakers may not actually use the actual word, but may be frustrated on stage, or they may look worried. If you understand these 7 triggers, then more than likely you can evaluate them at this level from an emotional perspective. It's not just about the speeches. It's about how they actually are portraying it. We've heard this before. We don't retell a story, we relive it. And part of that reliving is more than likely going to bring up one of these 7 triggers. So when you hear a speaker talk and they're basically bringing up a crisis or something, and they either use one of these 7 words or they're sharing the emotion of one of these 7 words, it becomes something that's pretty vital to the understanding that they are trying to connect with you with using the devil's cocktail, because there's something good that's coming up afterwards. This is something that you become astute if you actually study it a little bit. Let me go into this. Eric Byrne, I'm going to jump through this real quick because I've gone way over what I thought I would go, even though I worked this out to be at about 35 minutes. But Eric Byrne, anybody ever heard of transactional analysis? Okay. Transactional analysis is the understanding that people are in one of 3 different ego states at any time of the day or night. The difference is it's not a mental state or an emotional state or psychological state. It's an ego state. It's understanding that there are 2 kinds of parent ego states. There's 2 kinds of adults, but we're going to deal with one. It's the understanding that when you are speaking or when you're evaluating a speaker, are they speaking to you from a parent ego state where it's either critical or nurturing? Are they being nurturing to you? If they are, then more than likely they're going to connect with you at an emotional level. If they're being critical, they're going to deal with you, that you're going to feel like you're dealing with an adult. And the adult is the one that actually works from a cognitive, intellectual way. We're going to try and identify who is actually trying to give us content from an intellectual way as opposed to an emotional way, because the child ego state is the one that accepts emotions, the one that makes decisions. They say that people make decisions emotionally, then rationalize them intellectually. That's the child ego state speaking. Now, I know I've just breezed through all this and I apologize, but I wanted to make sure I got all this information into you. Probably more than you would actually want to know, but it allows you to actually look at how the professional side of the world does professional evaluations to speakers and how Toastmasters does. It's not to actually do one or the other, but to combine some of these astute understandings that you are hopefully learning into your next evaluation. So with that, I'm going to actually stop sharing my screen, and we're going to get to the fun part of this meeting or gathering. Do you have questions? Thank you, David.
Okay. Yeah, are you going to say your question, David? About resolve? Or I can say it. He didn't get the point of resolve. They make the point before resolving it.
if you are a solution and you're delivering if the speaker is delivering a solution in the process of them delivering a presentation to you, more than likely, if they come up with the solution before the actual solution, in other words, if I talk about the idea of getting to the hospital, I had an accident, I got to the hospital, and they worked on me for a while, and now I'm great. Now then you start going to the message. That leaves the audience almost thin. If you actually work, I had an accident, I'm rushed to the hospital, I'm in the gurney, and the lights are going through. Let's get into this particular element. Leave them hanging. Don't resolve the issue, that story, until later on. If a speaker can do that, they're going to engage you in a way that you probably have never seen. A good speaker can do that. And if you see one doing that, more than likely you can go ahead and give them the evaluation based on that. I hope that happens. Anyone else have any questions?
Yes, one question.
Yes.
Sabrina.
Hi, Sabrina.
It was about what you mentioned about past tense and basically kind of speak to it as if it's happening right now. Is speaking in past tense not connecting? Because everyone has a past, so I feel it's still connecting.
We know that all stories occurred in the past. We know that. But if I was to tell you a story about what happened to me when I was 27 years old, and I can tell you whatever that one particular event was like, do you care? I mean, it might be entertaining, but if I was to say that same event as we're having this argument and he just shoves me and all of a sudden we're in this fisticuffs, he knocks me down, I'm bleeding from my lip. That was almost 30 years ago. Now I basically brought in your attention and made that relevant to now. Does that make sense? Now that's from an engagement perspective. If a speaker does that, it's always cleaner if they talk in the present than if they talked in the past. Fair? I've unloaded quite a bit of information on you, much of which might not even be feasible for you, or it's something that you may want to even look at. And there's a lot more, but I need to shorten this out. This is a 5-day training, and of course I shortened it down to 4-day training, I shortened it down. But I believe wholeheartedly that more is caught than taught. And with that perspective, we've asked 2 people to actually give a 2 to 3 minute speech where I'm going to be giving an evaluation based on what I just shared with you. And I'm using the sheet that I just shared with you. So I want to bring up, I believe, is Dan first or is Eric first?
Yeah, Dan's first, and there will be, Rusty will be doing the time if you want to pin him, Dan or Eric.
Okay, and just to preload you here a little bit, Dan and I have had the opportunity to have a conversation earlier this week where I've got to know a little bit more about Dan and his ability to take punishment, I think is the word I want to use. I think that was more what he said. So I'm not going to put on any, you'll see. Dan, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you, Presiding Officer Fahey, our honored guests, and of course, all my fellow pace setters. I want you to think for just a moment about this question. What's our relationship with the animal kingdom? I mean, I know all about the master-slave relationship we have with our pets. And believe me, I don't like being enslaved any more than the next guy. But in this case, I'm talking about animals in the wild. How do we relate to them? Well, here's a tale that might give us a little insight. It's a story about Enzo Maiorca. He was an Italian free diver, one of these incredible athletes who try to dive as deep as possible into the ocean with no equipment whatsoever. Nothing but the man and his Speedo. Now, Maiorca earned the title of the world's deepest diver. He set all kinds of records, including when he was 57 years old, he set his final world's record. And to put that in a little perspective, a few years ago, I got to go scuba diving in the Florida Keys. And when I came up to the boat, I was so excited to look at my dive watch and realize I had made it down to 96 feet. And let me tell you, at that depth, even though you're wearing a mask and you got a cowl on, the water pressure is seriously uncomfortable. Well, Majorca at 57, with none of that gear, dove to a depth of 331 feet. The guy obviously had stainless steel eardrums. And he also had some kind of animal ESP, because as he told his biographer some years later, he was in the water swimming off the coast of Sicily one afternoon, talking to his daughter, Rosanna, who was in the boat, when he got bumped from behind. And he turned, he saw a dolphin. And as he related, for some reason, he knew that dolphin didn't want to play. In fact, the animal dove down under the surface. Majorca followed, and there, when they got to about 30 feet or so, there was another dolphin trapped in a fishing net, struggling to get free. Now, a dolphin can stay underwater 9-10 minutes, but as you know, they're mammals. If they stay underwater, they're going to die. So Majorca shot to the surface. He yelled to his daughter to grab their diving knives, and together the two of them went down, and they managed to hack open the fishing net. And the dolphin, as he related, let out an almost human cry. And together the two of them got the animal back to the surface. And then came a final surprise. The dolphin was pregnant. And so the male dolphin circled around Enzo and his daughter a couple times, and then went up to him and touched his face in a gesture of gratitude. And then the two dolphins swam off together. Well, the lesson here is that maybe we should have a little more respect for the intelligence and the lifestyles of those creatures in the animal world. And maybe some respect for a guy like Enzo Majorca, who seemed to have a way of communicating with them. Presiding Officer Fahey.
Thanks, Dan, for presenting a lighthearted, wonderful talk. I'd like to offer you some of my observations, which you are someone that apparently has had enough stage time that you understand some of the assets that you possess when it comes to being able to deliver some ideology, some concepts, and some emotion.
I tried to work the eyebrows big time. I hope you noticed that.
I did, which is something I'm going to mention regarding the emotional cap. Something that you, and again, because we've had a previous conversation, you have a beautiful reporter's face. Someone who actually is relatively stoic. Have you ever studied your assets as far as your face is concerned?
Not really, no.
Isn't it interesting that we basically allow other people to see who we are, but we don't actually like to see who we are ourselves? Everybody else has to see you, shouldn't you? And make a point to understand that there was a limited range of your emotions. Yes, you use your eyebrows, but throughout, even with the exception of when you said the depth of where you were going or where the dolphins were going, that's where you actually frowned, and that's the only time you did. Everything else was kind of a happy face. So I'm thinking this is going to be a happy story throughout. So when you brought up the crisis that occurred where they were trying to get him out of that net, I didn't believe it. Does that make sense? It wasn't something that you weren't reliving the story, you were retelling it. And that's perfectly fine, but understand most of that occurred based on the facial expressions that you were using, which I think if you become more aware of the assets that you possess, you might be able to, not just from your eyebrows perspective, but even from that smile, to actually become more neutral. And even when it goes to that frown, the frown just doesn't look from here up. It's your whole facial structure. That's something to take into consideration. Aside from that, eye contact was good. Humor was interesting, the way you brought that up. The narrative, I probably think you could have shortened it a little bit, but that doesn't allow for the understanding of what you were trying to explain. So I think you could have shortened the narrative, as I have, as I did today. I could have shortened quite a bit of it, but you wanted to get that point across. My perspective on this is to understand or become a student of your truth, your facial truth, because there was a couple disconnects of what you were saying to what I was watching, and I think that might be something for you to consider in the future. And I would suggest that you take my observation, my suggestion seriously, because you as a speaker, you're being portrayed not just by what you say, but by how you come across. So, is that fair?
Absolutely.
Excellent. And I think, does anybody else want to make any comments to Dan?
Yeah, there's an old expression my boss used to say about trying to cram 10 pounds of shit in a 5-pound bag for advertising. And I think you had this story, but you started off talking about the master-slave relationship, and then you got into this, and I think, that wasn't necessary. You could have jumped into the story in Mallorca right away and gone from there.
And this might go to the resolve or the crisis. You could have started your talk by, we're jamming our knife into the net, just trying to free this animal, and just, let me tell you how we got there. And now you've developed an interest. You've developed that, what? I want to see what happens. It's not clickbait, but it allows people to actually know that there is a crisis that's going to happen in this story, and how did you get there? That might be a story development type of a perspective, as opposed to an actual delivery development. Anyone else?
I guess that's kind of like how every James Bond movie starts, right?
Every good movie, actually.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just
Before
about
you know
every
any
good
of the details or context.
Well,
Amber has a question.
I have a comment. This is a matter of debate. It kind of bothers me when a speaker starts out with introducing the audience to each other, like, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters and guests, because I want them to jump right into the story also. I don't want those little courtesies at the beginning. And that's something that I've heard debated over and over.
If you've ever been to the theater and watched, whether it's a musical theater or an actual play of some sort, you will notice that the moment the curtains open, they're in the middle of something. There is no once upon a time. There is no this occurred. Let me set up the story. Let me give a narrative. Let me just get right into it. Great speakers are able to do that. Great evaluators are able to give that suggestion, to actually present not just the formalities or the salutations, but just get right into the heart of it. And if you could introduce the villain evilness or the crisis right off the bat, if there is one. Now, if there's just a PowerPoint that you're presenting information, if there's a story involved, of course, that's going to correlate to the information, the content you're sharing, not so much to the actual story you're sharing, you're presenting. But if it's a story that is you want to engage the audience with, bring them in as fast as you can to that level. Not every speaker speaks with the same amount of enthusiasm. I'm an active speaker. I tend to speak quite a bit from an energetic perspective. Other people are very low key, and that's perfectly fine. But if you're driving engagement to a point that you want people to connect with you, the words alone are not enough. And so that's something to take into consideration. The other aspect, when you mentioned the human cry, Dan, I noticed you went in a human cry, and I'm wondering, what was that? Human cry. I didn't get it. But it's a physical perspective, something that you actually wanted to share, whether it was voluntary or whether it wasn't, that it didn't connect with me. A human cry with that. I didn't quite get it, but I disavowed it, as we sometimes do, various gestures and body language with the disconnect with the words, or trying to understand that. And what happens is we start trying to think, why did he do that? Or why did she do that? And all of a sudden we're missing the rest of how they're what they're saying. We're going back to what they were shared. And that's something that I think I think you may want to consider. Should we jump on to Eric? Excellent. Thank you, Dan.
Well, jump aboard, Madam Toastmaster, fellow paysetters, and all our honored guests tonight. I have changed my mind. I don't think this seems like fun anymore. Just kidding. I wanted to talk about moments of truth. We recently had our moments of truth at Everett Paysetters, and I've been a member of Paysetters for 10 years or so. And one of the questions talks about mentoring. How often do you assign mentors to new club members? And the vast majority of our members said sometimes, rarely. A couple of members said always. So a real change, or a real difference in perception for assigning mentors. And so tonight, I wanted to, as a testimonial, really give credit to who I think has been an outstanding mentor at Everett Paysetters, and that is fellow member and my friend, Paul Adams. I scanned the list. Paul is not here tonight, so maybe his ears are burning as he's traveling from California back to Washington. But I have watched Paul over the years in a under the radar, but consistently reaching out to individuals and offering to them and actually serving as a mentor to them. So in a quiet way, he has served as an example to me, and I think as an example to others. I admire how Paul's kindness. I've noticed that a lot of times when he establishes this relationship, he starts off with his own time, at his own cost, reaching out to a new member. Why don't we have a cup of coffee? Let's get together and spend time together. And he'll find out what that member wants to accomplish. I also find him to be very effective. Sometimes I would even cringe during a meeting when this is our member's second time at a meeting, and when Scotia or another one of our officers is filling roles for the next meeting, Paul will volunteer that new member. Hey, are you ready to get your icebreaker yet? And this might be his or her only second meeting. But you know what? Sometimes the new members say no, and that's fine. And other times they say yes. So he gives them that opportunity to step up to the plate. And I've seen them progress. I've seen them be successful at accomplishing their goals. And then I really admire his humility. Paul does not do this he doesn't keep count he doesn't look at himself as the mentor for our club. He doesn't advertise that he's mentored over a dozen people in our club and other clubs and Toastmasters. He does this out of service to serve others. And so I like that too. They succeed. Paul's not there to take credit, but I can see every step of the way how he influences them, makes a difference, and can serve as an example to us. So what I'm thinking for myself and what I would encourage all Toastmasters is to be like Paul. Find a way that you can reach out, you can mentor others. So when you're asked at your club, when you do the moments of truth, you can honestly say that your club mentors new members all of the time. Omar, thank you for this opportunity. I'm looking forward to your feedback, and thank you again, everyone, tonight.
Thank you, Eric. You may want to wipe whatever you have on the left side of your mouth there. I hope you realize I'm joking because none of us can see you. So I'm making it up as I go. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Now, those of you that know the elements of communication, yay? Yes? Elements of communication? Albert Mehrabian? It's a ratio that has been used in the past where 7% content, 35% vocal variety or tonality, and then 50 some odd percent, 55% body language. When someone is on the phone, that body language or the tonality actually goes up to 88%. And that's something to take into consideration, which as evaluators, we start looking at figuring out what we're listening to. Did everybody listen to the passion that Eric had for Paul? Did you hear that? Yeah. Especially when he said, be like Paul. And he almost slowed it down and like, yes, take a bath, right? Just enjoy Paul or be like Paul. I thought that was excellent. The way he actually portrayed himself and his relationship with Paul came across in his voice. Now, we didn't get an opportunity to see his facial, his fruit, his emotional cap, how he actually used his eyebrows or anything of that nature, but we did get an opportunity to hear what we needed to hear in order to give an astute evaluation. And that evaluation is primarily where, whether this was something that was written down, it didn't sound like it was written down. Because you can almost tell when somebody's reading, it didn't sound that way. So this may have been extemporaneous or impromptu. And the idea of being able to deliver that type of passion on an impromptu stage, if you would, I think that deserves merit, without a doubt. I would like to just bring up the idea that when you mentioned and said tonight, I'd like to bring up the idea of Paul Adams. When you said tonight, it was interesting because you had developed up until that point. But I still have to ask, did you write this out? May I ask, Eric? Eric?
Can you not hear me?
I could now.
Omar?
Yes,
okay.
I could now.
No, I did not write that out. I have bandwidth problems, and so the video's dropped. I could see myself, but apparently the video connection was lost on the screen.
You have good control of your pausing. Obviously, the evaluation I'm giving you is based on what I heard. And what I felt, not so much what I saw. And what I heard was a passionate man giving credit and credence to a man who's actually been effective in his way when he's had a relationship with you. And that is something that I appreciate. I think you have, I don't want to say you have a face for radio, but at the same time, you may want to consider the understanding that that was a very well put together talk. My evaluation obviously is just based on voice. Did anybody else catch any particular nuances in his voice that you'd like to bring up?
I would say that knowing Eric and having heard previous speeches, knowing how he usually delivers his message, this was more subdued than it needed to be. He was being kind of intellectual about explaining why Paul was such a good mentor, when it really was about his feelings for him and seeing him in action, knowing how much he cares about the other members. I felt like he dialed it down unnecessarily.
Do you feel that he was heavy on the Angel's cocktail? Because if I was to ask everybody, how do you feel about Paul Adams? How did Eric make you feel about Paul Adams? There's almost a heartwarming effect that occurred. And it wasn't about Paul, because all we heard about was how Eric shared. And it wasn't the content, it was in the manner that he did that. So he really tapped into that feeling good chemical. He made us feel, how many of you want to be Paul? Right? You want somebody to talk to you about, talk about you in that way, with that type of passion. Anyone else have any comments?
Mine isn't about his vocal, the impressions I got from his vocal aspects, but I heard a past tense, I heard a wanted to, and the opening, I don't remember exactly what you said, Eric, but it put me off. Because I heard an unwillingness on your part, and maybe that was intentional, maybe that was intended to be humorous. I just thought, then why are you here? And then it was hard for me to get into your speech because I was thrown out at the beginning.
Thank you, Linda. And I think a lot of it was the first 30 seconds we're trying to figure out, where's Eric? Where's Eric? Where's Eric? And we're hearing a voice, but we couldn't see Eric. So a lot of that could be part of what you were actually experiencing. If there's nothing else, I want to be respectful for time, but at the same time, I hope I imparted quite a bit of information. And again, I just glanced over some of the information I shared with you. There's a lot more, but at the same time, if I've equipped you with at least one thing that you can use in the next evaluation, I have done my job. I have done what I planned out to do. Equip you with just one piece of, one tool that you can use in the next evaluation. Whether it's looking at how the Angel's Cocktail is used, are they using any of the 7 triggers, the Fadwaka? Are they able to actually put me into a child ego state with the words they're using so I can actually not have to intellectualize the information? Are they able to actually bring up some of the emotions that we want to feel? Content, they say, is king. I totally agree with that. But if it's delivered in a manner that is subpar, then more than likely the content doesn't matter. And all too often I've seen many intellectuals deliver information that is incredible, but it's delivered in a way that isn't being received or accepted in a manner that it was attempted to be delivered. And as evaluators, as professional evaluators, we have to look at that and identify what is it that we can offer this particular speaker in 3.5 minutes that would allow them to actually work on an asset base or a tool base that they can actually then progress. And the idea is to progress. We didn't join Toastmasters to give good speeches. We joined Toastmasters to become better speakers. So give an evaluation that is based for the speaker to improve. Yes, you have to include some ideas from the speech, especially if there's a message that's heavy and how it came about. But the idea is to offer as much as you can to the speaker to become aware of who they are. And as I tell many of my clients and the people that I've worked with in the past, record your talk, watch your talk, turn the sound down. Just watch your body language, even in this environment. Turn the sound down. Then turn around or close your eyes and then listen to the talk. Because what happens is when we look at our video and we look at it from the perspective with the sound, we're going to try and pick out the words. We're going to become deaf or blind to the visual aspects of that presentation. It's just a natural phenomenon that occurs when it comes to evaluating your own presentation. So I suggest taking a look at the asset base that you've got, how to improve it, and now you can actually, I'm equipping you with the understanding of how you can actually give that as an evaluation to the next speaker that you come across. Fair? Any questions for me?
I think I missed, what does FUDWACA mean or stand for?
It's frustrated, upset, disappointed, worried, angry, concerned, or anxious. I will get a handout out. In fact, what I'll do is I'll print out the PowerPoint, and I'll send it to Scotia, and then she can send that out to every one of you. Fair?
Thank you, Omar. And if you'd also like to share in the chat your contact information, if anybody would like to use Omar's expertise in their company, or, I mean, obviously he gives a lot of great information. I feel like we just scratched the surface. I had no idea how much we were missing. So you have opened our eyes and given us a thirst for more. And I would like it if everybody could come off mute and give Omar a huge round of applause, because I think he is so deserving of that. So everybody please come off mute and so much. And if everybody would also bear with me, and if they're okay with it, if you can come up, put your video on if you're off video, so I can get a picture for our Facebook. I understand if you don't want to show your face, but I would appreciate it if you can do that. And I will do a screenshot when I think there's, okay, everybody's smiling, everybody happy, everybody, yay, 1, 2, 3. Thank you. And any more comments for Omar?
I just put the emotional wheel on in the chat. Hopefully everybody can get it. And then I put in the Angel's cocktail in the chat.
A quick question, if I could.
I'm sorry?
A quick question, if I might.
Yeah.
Omar, do you, in your vast experience, do you, or have you worked with political candidates, with politicians, to evaluate the way they communicate? And if so, could you share maybe a takeaway or two that would be helpful dealing with that group of people?
I have had the opportunity to work with a local councilman in Florida, and that was a few years ago. The one aspect, I've never gone into the senators or congressmen or anything of that nature. What I have found is the most difficult hurdle that I've experienced is trying to get past the ego. And that's probably one of the most difficult perspectives with anyone. It's hard to learn something when you think you're all that in a bag of chips. But getting information or giving information to someone that they're not aware of, because focus groups can be put together as to, is this candidate believable? Does he come across or she come across authentic? That's something that I'm sure focus groups can give them better insights. But from an expert understanding, I don't know that they are willing to be able to accept some of the concepts that are given to them, primarily because all they want to do is get their content out. I think the politicians that I've come to know, and I knew quite a few here in town years ago, that they're more concerned on how their handshake comes across than their actual personality. And I think that's something I can't work with them on that. But if I'm always open, by all means, without a doubt. Any other questions? Oh, do I?
Oh, go ahead.
Well, thank you, David. I appreciate that. If anybody wants to drop me an evaluation on this presentation, by all means, you have my email address, or at least I put it out there. Feel free to just drop me an evaluation on how horrible I really was, because I can only grow when I know that I have something to do, which is something that I went to a Toastmaster meeting a few weeks back, and I was really concerned about the growth of that club, primarily because everybody was telling everybody else, oh, that was a great job. That was awesome. You did so great. Everything was super. And you did this. You may want to just wear a different dress. But other than that, everything was awesome. And, you were really good. And it's like, wow. It's like, there was so much sunshine being poured up people's derriere. I mean, it was blinding. My perspective of that is that how can you have growth when that occurs? Yes, you do want to praise people, especially if they're newer and they don't have that comfortable nature to speak in public. But the idea becomes, yes, once again, adhere to my rule: 3 good things and 21 things they have to work on. I'm being facetious, but the idea is that give me an evaluation if you wish, by all means. I really did push this a little harder than I should have. I could have cut out half of the information, but at the same time, there's so much more I wanted to give you, and I can't because of the limited time. But I do want to appreciate, I do want to thank you, and I appreciate wholeheartedly you're able to sit for an hour and a half and listen to me and obviously give some information out that I'm hoping will help you out a little bit. So I hope that helps.
Did you have time for a simple question of, have you ever seen a speech where you didn't have some feedback to give, where you said, you know what, there's nothing I can do to improve that?
Yes, I have.
Thank you, and I appreciated that one that you did that for me.
Yes, I have. And I've mentioned the fact that the only thing, I couldn't tell them on anything to improve. They did an outstanding job. And this was a professional speaker outside of Toastmaster. And actually was a colonel in the 82nd Airborne. But he was awesome. And after he got done, I said, I got to be honest with you. You know, you're good. But I would like to tell you one thing. Do your men believe you? And he just thought about that for a second. I said, oh, let me just paraphrase this a little bit. You say things to your soldiers that they have to do, but do they believe you? He came back afterwards and said, that is the most interesting question I've ever been asked. So I didn't give him an evaluation, and I didn't say that he had need to improve on something, but I made him think. And isn't that ultimately what we want as evaluators, to make your speakers think? And I think that I did my job there. But yes, I have had several, but him in particular is one I remember very well. Any other questions for me? I want to be respectful of your time. Skoshi, I'm honored and privileged that you gave me the opportunity to come out and just share some of my understandings, experiences, and observations. I hope it was helpful. So it was a fire hose, I know, and I should have just cut it. I should have just cut it back. But at the same time, I hope it helped out.
Thank you, Omar. I think we all benefited and learned, and I thank you, all our guests who came tonight and our members. And just a reminder, there is a area contest for our club members are going, and that's going to be March 20th. So please be there to cheer them on. And there is a district conference in May, the 21st and 22nd. And dues are due. And that's all I'm going to say. So thank you, everybody, and have a wonderful night from DC to every place you're at. Thank you all. And you're welcome to stay if you want to chat afterwards.
I'll hang out for a little while.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Dan.
That's good. Yeah. That's good. There's always a few
Thanks,
chatty.
everyone.
Thanks so much.
My
So
pleasure.
I will say, Omar, yeah, it was an awful lot of information, but
Yeah.
every time a speaker is presenting concepts or putting together a program where we're not already somewhat familiar with it, it becomes kind of a scattershot process anyway. And I feel like it's up to the audience in many cases to pick and choose what really resonated with them. And when there's no opportunity to then regroup and discuss and provide feedback to make it more interactive, then it's tough for you to know that, hey, what I really got was the fact that you told me just jump into the story, start with the drama, take us right to the crisis. That was my takeaway, which was tremendously helpful. I'm sure other people picked other things out of the fire hose that was helpful to them. So I don't know. I don't feel it's necessary to apologize for giving us too much, because it's up to us to pick and choose and walk away with something out of that smorgasbord that is going to work for us.
Yeah, my perspective. Thank you, Dan. Dan, I appreciate you bringing that up. It's one of those. Most of the training that I do, obviously, is the speaker version, not the evaluation version. I do the evaluation myself. So when preparing for this, I had to sit back and start writing. How do I process through this as an evaluator? Because I'm doing engagement training to allow executives on how they can engage an audience and what are some of the aspects. And I bring up most of the psychology and the philosophy of engagement. And then I broke that down to how I evaluate, which is why I brought up that one sheet. And of course, this is my sheet of Dan and Eric. So I use that as a guideline. Now, of course, at least in a typical Toastmasters environment, you have a speaker that will speak, and then you have a second speaker, maybe a third speaker, and then you may have table topics, and then you have the first evaluator who will present maybe 10, 15 minutes after the first speaker has spoken. I don't have that luxury when I'm working with professionals. They basically speak, and as soon as they're done, I'm giving them, and so I have to find a better way for me to connect with them in a way that suits my understanding of what I want to deliver, my planning stage, if you would. My implementation is as I mark everything down, and then I complete it with one particular sentence that I'm going to start with. And that's usually how I bring things about. There are many evaluation workshops that have been given at District 2 and District 21 and District 96 and District 32, District 7. But my perspective is that not many people are offering a professional version of this. And again, I do this over a 4-day period, so I have the opportunity to let it breathe and then bring on more information, because each one of those topics, the 24 topics that I bring up in my evaluation, each one of those is like a 15 to 20 minute talk. And so this can go on for quite a while. It's an interactive talk, but it allows them to understand a little bit more. Ultimately, all I want is to raise their asset awareness. What is the asset that you possess that you can actually explore? Because after 16 years in Toastmasters is no longer a place, well, to some extent, that I learn. It's a place that I explore. It's a safe environment for me to explore some of the things that I haven't done before and see if they work. And if they don't work, that's where the growth occurs in me now. And so that's where sometimes we feel that, oh, I'm done with Toastmasters. I've learned everything I need to know. Yeah, but what if you actually use this particular knowledge and use it for this particular speech, doing motivational or any type of, not project-based, but how can you explore humor during a eulogy? That type of an aspect. So I appreciate your comments, and at the same time, I think, I just didn't want to rush myself. And I did give you quite a bit of information. And so maybe one day when my curriculum comes out, you'll take a look at it.
David, I know you got a question. Sorry, I just had a quick follow-up. I attended a meeting of another club, this Community Impact Toastmasters. What they did immediately after the speech, they did a round robin where 3 different people gave a quick 1-minute evaluation, their comments, their observations. Then they had the formal evaluation, the 3-minute evaluation we're familiar with.
Mm-hmm.
That more in the lines of what you're thinking, where there's some immediate feedback, which requires you to really zero in on something of value to the speaker?
Yes, in fact, there are many clubs that actually offer that type of a format where the evaluators or the round robin evaluators offer a particular segment. So they might give a 1-minute dissertation, if you would, regarding the content, and a 1-minute dissertation on how it was presented, how was it delivered, and then the other one is might be on the message itself. So you may get 3 perspectives on that particular speaker, and then one evaluator that will wrap everything up and pick up off of those 3 perspectives of that speaker. That is wonderful, but it takes quite a bit. When you're focused into what you heard or what you saw or what you felt, as far as message is concerned, it's a lot easier to deliver an evaluation. One that encompasses all three, that's a tough one, because, and then distill it down, implement it down, or complete it down to the point where you're actually delivering it in 3.5 minutes. That's almost impossible. But we have to give the speaker something to walk away. And a lot of it is not so much, hey, how good they did, or how they might improve one particular. How often have you heard a comment at the end of an evaluation? Should you give this speech again? Who the heck gives a speech again, right? I mean, I did when I'm working to the World Championship Public Speaking. I gave the same speech 67 times. But at the same time, very rarely do you get a chance, except for the new Pathways has a project that you have to give a speech and then take the evaluation and give the speech again. But very few people actually get to give a speech again. What if you gave a speech 10 times in a different way? What would that look like? And make it interesting every time. That's a challenge. Thank you, Dan. David.
Yeah, one of the things that as I watch you talking about evaluations, you know, I'm a sponge when you are going through these things. And you are one of my favorite people to evaluate, because you're kind of like level 9 on Pac-Man. It's a serious challenge. Always looking for that, how can I not get hit by the ghost? I mean, looking for what is it in your speech to improve? And that's why I take that as a personal challenge, because you're so good at it that it forces me to be a better evaluator. On the point that was mentioned earlier by Dan, I was going to phrase it this way. Consider that you don't discredit your speech by saying this is supposed to be a 5-day presentation, or I just glanced over what I was going to show you, but rather flip the script and say, more, this is like a movie trailer to, and if you liked this is a 5 days worth of stuff. So turn that negative into a positive.
Thank you.
And paint your picture rosy. Sell yourself.
I like that. I try to be as humble as possible inside of Toastmasters. Outside, I'm like a lady of the night. I mean, I'm out there just trying to, yeah, baby, come here, you know. But inside Toastmasters, I try to keep it as decorum as possible, because, okay, when I first joined Toastmasters, which was Rye Toastmasters, my home club, the things they said you could not talk about is religion, politics, or try to sell anything. And that was always in the back of my mind, not trying to sell anything. And so, yes, it's something that within Toastmasters, I mean, most of the world champions of public speaking, they make a relatively good living supplying Toastmasters with information. I'm a loser when it comes to being at the World Championship of Public Speaking. I'm in one of the top 9. I didn't make it, right? But so I have nothing to sell. Well, I do, but I do it on the professional side. So, thank you, though. I'll keep the selling to a minimum, but at the same time, if there's value, people will seek me out. I think that's
so. Still, you don't have to make it as you're selling something, but just maybe as a highlight of. And if you thought this was good, understand that you're getting it distilled down from what is a 5-day presentation, but making it sound like, wow, this is a good thing. What we're getting the best of the best of that 5-day presentation.
Yes. In essence, you are, or you did, but it was hard to throw things out. And I kept, in fact, right up until about 6:15, I knocked out about 7-8 slides off the presentation. I'm like, there's no way I can do this in half an hour. I'm like, yeah, I can try it. I can do it. But I just got into it. And I apologize for going longer than I said I would. And so I apologize for that. I like to be respectful of his time. But thank you, David. I appreciate your feedback on that, without a doubt. And I'll take that heavily into consideration, without a doubt.
Hey, one quick comment about the perfect speech or the perfect speaker, by the way. Just remember, Tiger Woods hires a swing coach. Roger Federer has a tennis coach. The greatest athletes in the world hire coaches to tell them what they need to improve on. So nobody's perfect. And even the greatest speaker, like you said, there's aspects you want to think about. and consider improving, especially based on who the audience is, because a
Yep.
great speech for one audience falls flat with a different audience.
And it's all perspective.
I found that out when I when I try to talk to the 12-year-olds I'm coaching in speech and debate. Different audience than Toastmasters.
That's a challenge. That's a definite challenge. Skoshi.
Yeah, I just wonder, when you're a member of an advanced Toastmaster club, how long are the evaluations?
I belong to one club that has speakers that will speak up to 55 minutes. In fact, the feature speaker speaks 55 minutes, and then the next two speakers, is four of them. The next one speaks to 30 minutes, then 20 minutes, then 15 minutes. The featured evaluator speaks 5 to 7 minutes as an evaluation, and then there's a 5 to 7 minute round robin. And the other ones are 2 to 3 minutes. And we have extended occasionally to 3 to 5 minutes, and then a 3 to 5 minute round robin if there's less than 4 speakers. And the club I'm speaking of is TME. And there are other clubs that give round robin evaluations. The biggest, and again, when I was working hard towards getting to the World Champion of Public Speaking, and it was interesting to get multiple round robins and lots of different evaluations. And everybody was giving me, in some aspect, contradictory evaluations. The biggest challenge to a speaker when getting quite a bit of information from different evaluators is discern what works best for you. And this goes back to understanding, what is your asset base? Somebody telling me that you need to be a little more calm and a little more, I slur my words. I'm from New York and I'm Cuban, for heaven's sake. So the idea is I slur my words. And people have told me, Omar, you need to speak a little more accurately, with a little more elocution. And I'm like, that's not me. I am who I am. So I will design my speeches around who I am. I'm active. I use my hands. I'm very expressive in how I bring things up. It's who I am. So some people will try and shape the speaker from their evaluation in a way that they think the speaker should work, which is fine. But also give the speaker an opportunity to understand what their asset is. Do they have a good smile? I call it weaponizing their smile, or weaponizing their eyebrows, or weaponizing how they use the stage. It's weaponized because they can kill the audience, and kill from the comedy perspective. Man, that comedian killed. That's the idea that I bring up is, are you aware that when you smile, everything just lights up? Or are you aware that you have this incredible, beautiful eyes that just bring people in? And when you give that type of comment, it's a comment that just allows the speaker to, really? And again, you get more of that than you do, oh yeah, I know, I got great eyes, I know that. Nobody says that. So the idea is that offering something to the speaker that they can learn from their own assets as opposed to your opinion. That, I think, is what really grows a speaker. It is your opinion about their assets. I don't want to take up too much time, but I'll share a quick story. When I was working towards the World Champion of Public Speaking, I was a little on the heavier side. I was much heavier than I am now, and I had this pretty big belly. And I've always had this conscious understanding, and everywhere I spoke back then was with a tie. I was a suit and tie guy 4 days a week when I spoke at different venues here. What I found is that I was so conscious of my tie coming down my chest and then over my belly. And I developed, actually, a way of speaking in live where I would bend forward a little bit so my tie was straight. And I would make my points. I would try to disavow that. So in one of the decks, I think, or the Decums, or a TLI or Melee back then, there were 300 people in attendance. and I was going to be a speaker who had won the district and going to the World Championship of Public Speaking. So they gave me an opportunity to go ahead and deliver there. I printed out a custom-made evaluation form, and I gave it out to everybody. 316 people, I think, went to that particular melee or whatever it was. And one of the questions that I asked, are there physical attributes of the speaker that you feel could be a deterrent to their ability to connect with the audience? Is there a particular way that the speaker is connecting that could be less than admirable or less than approachable? So I was looking to extract them to talk about my tie. Nobody mentioned, I had 288 feedback. Nobody mentioned my tie. And it didn't occur to me, honestly, because I was so conscious of one particular asset that I had. But it became the reason that I started to talk. When I give a point, I bend over so that my tie is straight. Now I do it, although I'm not thin, but I don't have that huge belly anymore. It's now a way that I communicate. If someone would have told me or asked me, Omar, is there something regarding your body you're concerned about? Because you keep bending over when you do this. And letting the speaker become aware of their assets is probably more critical than the way that they deliver the speech. And now you can work on improving that asset. If they have a good smile, but they're holding it back. If they're good at humor, but they're being a little more reserved. If they're basically trying to be too funny and they really aren't. I know a few of those. Give them an asset analysis. That's the true aspect of an evaluation. That make sense?
Yeah, it reminded me a little when you talked about eyebrows of Kramer in Seinfeld, because he uses his eyebrows. And same with Fran Drescher and her accent.
Yes.
She thought she had to lose it, and people love her for that.
Yep. Or what's the actress that has the little gap in her teeth, or, yeah. The idea is to enhance the person's asset or share with them what might be a deterrent. They don't know. There was a gentleman in one of the clubs I was in, and he had a very nervous tick, and his tick was he would do this with his nose, and he would speak, and as he's speaking he would just do this. And so I recorded all of the meetings of that particular club, and I asked him, I said, I'm concerned about, do you have a olfactory issue? He said, no. I said, you realize that you touched your nose probably about 15 times in the first 2 minutes of your talk? No, I didn't. I said, yeah, you did. In fact, I'd like to send you the video. He called me up about a day or two after I sent him the video, and he was like shocked. I had never seen that. It's like it's an asset that's a deterrent that nobody was able to bring it up. Evaluators never have. Nobody else has because they feel it might be a personal problem. So I brought it up on a personal level, and it became something that he worked on for the next 2 or 3 years. So as evaluators, we have that opportunity to do that. And of course, whether it's personal or whether it's something you can share openly or not. So
Videotaping yourself is amazing. I know I did that when I first joined Toastmasters, and you know how they say make contact with the audience and that. And so afterwards, when I watched myself, and I looked like a cat watching a ping pong table, I was just back and forth, and you don't know until you see yourself. So
I have recorded every training I've ever done, and yeah, I've recorded every single one, and I review it. I review it to understand, and again, I look at it with the sound turned off, and I'll start thinking, what the heck was I saying when I was doing this? This made no sense whatsoever. And I was curious, because what did this mean? And I became more astute and understanding. In fact, I did a couple speeches specifically to the evaluator. I said, I'd like you to evaluate my left hand. That's it. Just evaluate my left hand, because my left hand does things it shouldn't do. So please, and they did. They did a 3.5 minute talk on my left hand. Again, we're here to grow. And the idea is to share your opinions. The more equipped you are with a skill set or the understanding of a skill set, whether it's the science, the philosophy, or the practical application of communication or engagement, the more equipped you are, the more astute you can deliver an asset-based analysis towards the speaker. And that, I think, enhances growth more than, I think you could have done this, and I believe this. This is something you may want to consider. Those are the perspectives I think that as evaluators may want to consider. But you can't talk about that until they're equipped. And so that's why I brought up the equipping, the transactional analysis, the understanding. How did that person actually put me in this particular mood? Listen, you had great eyes, and the way you actually presented the story about your brother really put me to understand and accept what you were sharing. And so that all of a sudden is based on what you're equipped with. And so that's what I was trying to do today, equip people.
You certainly did.
It's a great point about recording yourself and watching those videos, because thanks to COVID, the speech tournaments for these middle school kids had to be done virtually. Now, normally they're done in person. Everybody congregates at a high school, as you probably know, and they go into the classrooms and they compete in front of a small group. And when they had to create their video of their presentation and submit the video, I found out a lot of kids did it over and over and over, because they would record it and watch it and go, oh man, I messed that up. Let's do it again. Whereas when it's in person, the biggest challenge of a coach is getting past the idea that kids, when they're 12 years old, like, yeah, I'm good. I practiced. I'm ready to go. I got it. I got this. But when they had to do it on video and then watch it to make sure the sound and the framing was suitable, I found out a lot of them did it over and over again, which that's how you get better. So as bad as it was to have to be isolated and people couldn't see each other giving speeches, the fact that they did it on video actually was a fabulous training tool for a lot of these young people. So I'm going to keep doing it even when we go back to in-person tournaments. Record a video, make them watch it.
Make them watch it first, listen to it second, then watch it and listen at the same time. And I do it in that manner. Other people do it differently, obviously, where they will listen to it first, then watch it. But 87% of the country is visual, but when that doesn't connect, a higher percentage are actually become auditory. And we are prone to listen to what we actually prepared to deliver verbally from an auditory mindset, as opposed to understanding that this is the full package. This is our tool set. This is our toolbox. Are you actually delivering something with a screwdriver, a hammer, a wrench, whatever it might be? Are you bringing that to light, or at least are you evaluating it from that perspective? What's their whole toolbox?
Yeah, well, one of the things we do that's kind of fun, I think I mentioned this to you, that we'll take one of the best speakers and they deliver their speech, and two students are blindfolded and they can only hear what the speaker's saying. Two other students put on those noise canceling headphones so they can't hear, they can only watch it. And then both groups get together and prepare their evaluation of their comments on the speech. And it's so amazing to see how much they differ. Some speakers are just fabulous at the gestures and the emotion. They're so animated, but they don't bring the characters to life vocally necessarily in their scripted stories, versus others that I tell them, hey, if this were radio, you'd be winning gold medals, but it's not.
Well, it's interesting because
it's really fun to see the difference when people are deprived of both senses. Like you said at the beginning, we have multiple senses to evaluate a presentation. So I actually, Scotia, I'd love to try that in our club just for fun once.
Yes, I think it'd be great. And thanks, David. Oh, he's too late. He's off. So I think that'd be great.
Yeah,
Well,
I think
that's one thing in our club is that we're kind of hesitant to video, or people aren't excited about it. But we really need to double our efforts on recording speeches and watching them.
Yeah, and they should be responsible for doing it themselves, because that way they can do it in private as opposed to something that's publicly available. But I think the idea of just understanding this, we work on everything. We work on our cars, our jobs, our careers, our yard. We work on everything except ourselves, primarily because we don't want to see what's missing or what's a problem. And if somebody mentions it, it becomes almost insulting. And we're here at Toastmasters become a better speaker, not a better speech giver. Does that make sense? And we need to, as evaluators, just raise that bar. And the easiest way to do it is going through the asset base. But you have to know what is their assets and how to actually conjure it up. So I hope I equip people with a little bit of that, and they can actually look at it. And hopefully some people will actually start looking up transactional analysis. Oh my God, I can do this and this and this, or primary. I didn't go into primary sensory dominance or anything of that nature, but it's just that giving people that tool set or toolbox. So thank you, Skoshi, for the opportunity. Dan, thank you very much. Eric, I appreciate you coming up, and I would have loved to just terrify you with an evaluation. But again, your loss.
I'll tell you what, Omar, I appreciate what you did tonight. I'm sorry the video didn't come through, and
Understand.
the extra time that you spent with us tonight for the last 30 minutes, that I wish everybody had stayed on for the full 30 minutes, because some of just your candor and explaining about how to differentiate feedback that's worth keeping to be authentic, and knowing when to reject some of the feedback because it might just take you in a different direction away from the message that you're trying to convey. I thought that was a really good point. And then I also liked about mentioning your perception with the tie, something you were so focused on, and how you used other people's evaluations as a way to shed yourself of that focus on your tie. So some really good points. Thanks for spending the extra time with us.
Oh, my pleasure. I mean, we all have something that we're not so proud of when we present ourselves. And a year ago, right now, right about now, I had gone through life-changing surgery. My whole jaw was reconfigured. My dad broke my jaw when I was a 12-year-old, and for about 40 some odd years, I lived with massive pain. And so my jaw was not wired shut, but it was reconstructed. For 4 months, I had liquid food. And so that was one of my biggest concerns, that I wasn't going to be able to speak again. And through therapy and a variety of other aspects. But my first speech was 10 days after I got out of the hospital, out of the 9-hour surgery. And I had to give a speech to the CEO to CEO organization. And I said, I got to tell you right off the bat, I'm going to be drooling. And I did, because it was still drooling. But I gave a 45-minute talk. And because that's what we do, right? We're speakers, or at least I am. And that's what we do. So, but there are aspects of ourselves, whether it's our belly or whether it's our eyebrows or our hair or whatever it might be, that we're concerned about. And sometimes it doesn't matter if you're someone who actually is delivering a message that people want to hear. So aside from that, I'm highly appreciative and privileged and honored that I've had an opportunity. Thank you very much, Skoshi, for reaching out and allowing me to share my experiences here.
Thank you,
so
Omar.
much.
Good stuff.
Thank you.
My pleasure. You have a recording of the after party, so you can you can share that with your club members or whoever you like. I would prefer it not to be public, like YouTube or something like that, but by all means, feel free to share it with anybody within the Toastmasters community. I would very much appreciate that. But yeah, I don't care who sees it, as long as it's not in a public format that my professional clients can see it.
No, it won't be. And I'm sorry we missed, I think, the first 2 minutes. I forgot to ask people if they're okay being recorded. And then Russ is like, should we record? And I'm like, yes.
Go.
Go.
Once again, thank you very much. I know now you meet every Thursday, every Thursday. Mm-hmm. And I see you now in Starburst. So what's going on for April what, 4th or April? Who's
April
speaking?
7th is Kyle Hall.
Oh, yeah, Kyle and I are old clubmates. He does a pretty good evaluation workshop also. And his is more Toastmaster oriented. But yeah, Kyle and I have known each other for many, many years. In fact, I joined TME because he was a member there. And I wanted to be the world champion of public speaking, so I heard he was there, so I said I joined. And him and I become good friends. And I became district director in this district. And then the year after, he became district director that year. Or we worked up the chain just like I did, but I was 1 year ahead of him. So
I heard him give the caterpillar speech, and it was so hard for people to evaluate him because it was such a almost perfect speech. So,
Yep.
and I keep bugging him to make it into a book, a kid's book. I don't know if you've ever heard that speech, but
I have.
the caterpillar mother.
I may come out and listen to him, maybe even heckle him. That'd be awesome.
He's doing the mind mapping one.
Yep. Yeah, I've seen that one a few times
Yeah,
also.
I'm sure you have too. So.
I have. Yeah, him and I actually got an argument because he does mind mapping in a circular manner. I do it in a linear. And because he does all about the mapping of the mind, and I'm thinking, but you can only look at one idea at a time, so it has to be linear. So you have to go into segue and what is a story and how does he make that up and story and then emotion and then so it's linear for me. That's the way I think. He does that, yeah. But it's awesome. It's a wonderful, wonderful training. So yes, I may more than likely enjoy you. I'm putting it on my calendar to join you next month, if I may.
Yeah, sure. No, I'll send the link to you. It's going to be in Starburst again, and
thank you.
Hopefully, I'll have the great. I'm going to try and get Rebecca Murray.
Oh, good. Gentlemen,
Jump off,
ladies.
but thank you so much, Omar.
Thank you, Dan.
Josie, for putting this together, and also kudos to Eric for stepping up to the firing line.
Yes.
To you both.
Yeah,
I was
stepping
a little
up.
nervous, I got to be honest. But I came away with some great stuff, so I really appreciate it, and thanks so much.
Awesome.
Also, I dropped you an email, so I got something for you I want to send you if you shoot me your address.
Thank you. I appreciate that, without a doubt.
All right.
Thank you once
Have a
again.
good night, everyone.
Good night.
I'm blessed. Thank you. Take care.
Good night.